Hello. In this video, we're going to look at how to find the maximum and minimum value in an array in Java. Now, to do this, what we do is we're going to start, actually, let me roll back here. We're going to start by just finding the maximum value, and then we'll introduce the minimum value because essentially it's the same concept. So I'm going to make a variable called maxVal, and I'm going to initialize it to the first element. This is really important. And the reason why it's really important is because by doing this, I don't need to know anything about the range of values that are contained in my array. Sometimes what students do is they'll initialize this to something like 0. We're in the habit of declaring an integer initializing to 0. And in this case, it would work perfectly fine because obviously there's something larger than 0 in my list. But if my list only contained negative values, when I'm done, it would say that the maximum value of my list is 0. Once I've done this, I'll jump in and I'll show you how this is a problem. But the key thing to remember is that you always initialize your maximum and your minimum value to the first element in the list. Then all we do is we simply write a loop that's going to look at each element in sequence and compare it to the current maxVal. I apologize if I'm a little slow in some of my coding. I've been coding in Python and Java, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting to declare my type of variables. So I'm going to write my standard loop. This is kind of my standard loop that's going to look at every element in an array. Remember that we want to actually calculate the length of the array using the built-in constant. Do not ever write the numerical value there, because by actually using the built-in constant, I can then have this work with an array of any length. And then we could put an if statement. We could say if maxVal is less than array at I. All we do is we say maxVal is equal to array at I. And then it will come down here and we'll go system.out.println, the long way of saying print in Java. We'll go maxVal. And if I run this now, sure enough, there's my maximum value of 73. Wonderful. Now let's add the minimum into here. So I'm going to make an int, call it minval. I'm going to set it to array at 0. Again, initialize it to my very first element. And I'm going to make another if statement down here and say if minval is greater than array at I, basically saying that if my current value in my array is less than min value, we're going to say minval is equal to array at I. We're going to overwrite it. So it's the same concept as finding the max. We've just switched the inequality. And let's print this out again at the bottom. Minval. We'll just pull this up to make this look a little neater. There we go. And if I run this now, maximum is 73, minimum is 1, no problem. Now, a couple little things that people might do when they do this is, often you'll see programmers, they won't use this if statement here, they use the built-in max function. So they say maxVal is equal to math.max, and we're going to look at compare the current maxVal to the array at I. So this does the same thing as that if statement, but it uses the built-in max function, which is a static function contained in the math class. Minval equals math.min, minval array at I. So this has no impact on the result. It just is a little bit cleaner, and is what programmers typically tend to do. They tend to use this built-in function max and this built-in function min, which is contained inside the math class. And if I run this, there you go. Now before we wrap up, let's just simulate that specific error I talked about in terms of initializing your maxVal and your minval to something other than the first element in the list. And just to be clear, you can actually initialize it to any element in the list as long as it's something that is contained within the list. Let's initialize both of these to 0. Because again, when we're learning to program, we tend to initialize our variables to 0 just by default, and we might do this. And if I run this, sure enough, I see I have a problem with the min, but the max is fine. So let's talk about why that is. If we take a look at all these values in the list, 0 is smaller than all of them. There is something larger than 0, so that means that 0 will get overridden. But in the case of the minimum value, all of the values in the list are actually greater than this. So therefore, based on our algorithm, min value will never get overridden. So that's a problem. So it's not that it will always be wrong, but it could be wrong by initializing them to values that might sit outside. Sorry, let me rephrase this. It might be a problem if we initialize our minimum value to something smaller than the smallest element in the list. So because of this, in order to initialize to a value, I need to know the actual range of values in this list. So to get around this problem is we always initialize it to something in the list. And this will always solve that problem. Oh, not I, pardon me. 0. And there we go. I hope this video helped, and as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.